Okay, so I think we're going to begin. So, hello and welcome. So, my name is Dr. Joshua Black, and I work at the BC Center for Palliative Care as the Bereavement Initiative Manager. And I have had the pleasure to lead all the center's bereavement studies since 2021. And in my spare time, I host the Grief Dreams podcast. And here with me today is my colleague Stephanie, who will be running the Zoom for us and providing any kind of technical support that we need. Next slide. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the BC Center for Palliative Care works with partners across the land colonially known as British Columbia, and the work we do on the territories of many distinct First Nations. And so we are grateful to all the First Nations who have cared for and nurtured the lands and waters for all time. And I'd like to acknowledge the land in which I live on is the unceded Stalo territory and was colonially known as Abbotsford in British Columbia, Canada. And we recognize that all of you are joining us, maybe participating from different traditional territories of other Indigenous peoples. So from coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral, unceded territories of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples that call this land home. And so you're welcome to put in the chat on where you are joining from today, if you want. And next slide. So this is the 15th BC Center for Palliative Care Echo session on our series on grief and bereavement literacy. And so each month we focus on a different topic. So with the topic for next month being neurodivergence, grief, and bereavement, and our past sessions, like last month's what happens after someone dies, can all be viewed on our website. And so I think Stephanie's going to put in a link for that. And so the need to increase grief and bereavement knowledge came from our different research studies, with one study being a province round table with knowledge users in British Columbia that really aimed to identify priority actions to address the needs of bereaved people and to recommend strategies to improve bereavement services. And so we developed the action plan. And so there's a document, and if you want to view that, it is on our website. I think Stephanie may be putting that in the chat also. If not, you can visit the website for that. And so today we are using the Echo platform as it creates a knowledge sharing network to share experiences and learning. And so today's session will have a presentation and then a Q&A. So while we strive to create a safe environment in every Echo session, we do recognize that the nature of these sessions can touch on both personal and emotional subjects for many. So if you do not feel comfortable sharing your name or image during the sessions, feel free to turn off your camera or delete your name or change your name. And the sessions are being recorded, and the recording will be edited before sharing, along with session summary notes that really capture the discussion, any kind of resources that are shared. Next slide. And so the production of this presentation has made possible through the financial contributions from Health Canada, and it's just the views expressed here and do not necessarily represent the views of Health Canada. Next slide. And so today's 15th session on grief and bereavement literacy is titled The Playful Art of Supporting Children with Grief Using Play Therapy as a Way to Communicate. So just let me introduce you to Dallas Shirley, who will be our presenter today. And so Dallas is a mom in an amazing neurodiverse family, a partner, a sister, a daughter, an aunt, a friend, a registered clinical counselor, and a BC registered play therapist. Since 2004, she has been focused on helping to support families with grief and loss. And Dallas worked at the Chilliwack Hospice as a child and youth and family counselor, Abbotsford Hospice as the children's service manager, and now she's at the Kamloops Hospice as the children's services coordinator. She volunteered at Canuck Place Children's Hospice for 10 years and provided support for bereavement groups for children, youth, and adults. She also has a private practice where she helps to support children and families online using online sand trays, board games, music, art programs, as well as helping families set up a space in their homes to share feelings through hands-on expressive activities. And so Dallas is joining us from the unceded lands of the Secwepemc people. And so today's session will have an educational presentation followed by the Q&A. But before we begin this presentation, I'm really excited for it. I know Dallas personally, and I'm always interested in what she has to say because she has so much knowledge. So, but before we begin, we want to know what is your current level of knowledge on this topic? Okay, so the numbers are coming in. I don't know, Dallas, if you can see those numbers at all. No? Okay. So can we share the results to people? So basically 26% not at all, 63% somewhat, and 11% said very knowledgeable. Okay, so as Dallas gets ready to begin, there's also going to be an activity that she has planned. So if you could get something to draw with and draw on, that would be helpful. So now I'm going to pass the session over to Dallas.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joshua. I'm just so grateful to be here with you all today. And like Joshua said, many of us are here from other places. I'm on the lands of the Tk'emlech Secwepemc people, and I've been so grateful for all the lands that I've lived on and worked on in my life. I've lived on the lands of the Stolo Nation, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, the Wasanic people, the Katsi First Nation, and the Secwepemc people. And if you're not sure whose land you live on, you could go to native-land.ca to find out. As someone who helps to support children, it's my responsibility to advocate for the safety of children everywhere. It's hard to focus on feelings such as grief when our safety is not mostly guaranteed. The significance of where I currently live and work is a place that brought more awareness to the tragic losses that Indigenous people have experienced and continue to experience. What happened to Indigenous children and families through colonial systems, such as residential schools and the 60 scoop, is the opposite of safety. There's still so much work that needs to be done to create systems where children can hopefully feel safe so we can better focus on their feelings and what they need to help support them. So I'm just so grateful to be here spending time with you all today, a group of people who are dedicated to helping to support the safety and care of people. I thank you for being here, and I'm really excited to spend this time with you. Oh, I want to move this out of the way so I can see you all a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So we're going to start off in Mindful Meadows. So I do a little bit of virtual work, which is what Joshua was saying earlier. And so this is just a little snippet of it so I can show you kind of how you can work virtually online as well through the magic of PowerPoint. So we're going to start out in Mindful Meadows, and then we'll go over here into Cozy Cabin. So you can see some of the activities that we do, and you might notice some of them by the end of the day of what we're going to talk about. But what I want to start out with is going into the remembering room. This place is filled with all sorts of different activities to be able to express our feelings of grief and loss. And I want to start out with you all doing an ideal grief dream. And this is so much inspired by the work of Josh and Joshua Black, his amazing work on grief dreams. And I happened to go to a workshop that he was doing, I want to say it was at least a decade ago. And there was a youth that I was working with at the time that was having some really hard nightmares. And so we did this activity that he had suggested, and it worked, and their nightmares that they had been having night after night actually disappeared. It took a month of this activity helping, but it worked. And so I've since then used this in grief groups, in individual counseling. And so I want to try it with you all today. So I want you to think about a place that you feel safe. It can be a fantasy place. It doesn't have to be a real place. It can be outer space if you want. It can be in your living room. It can be in a forest or on a beach. It's totally up to you. I want you to think about, like, go into the most detail you possibly can go into of what does the weather look like? What time of day is it? Like in mine, there's a rainbow, but it's also snowing. So, whatever you want it to be. I want you to think about what does it sound like, and feel free to jot some of these things down before you do your drawing. It might be helpful. And in terms of what it sounds like is it piano music? Is it heavy metal? Is it birds? Is it waves? It could be anything really that brings you a sense of joy or comfort. And then how will you represent that in your drawing? If you could put anything in this magical place that is comforting to you to feel, what would that be? So you could have a big beanbag chair. It could be your bed. It could be comfy clothing that you can have. It could also be animals or pets that you've had that are either alive or no longer alive. Like I might have in mine, I might have my cats, which you might see them move. I should warn you right now that they might move. They're up on top of the dollhouse right now. Buddy and Pal are up there, and so maybe they'll come to this magical place. Uh, this is my favorite one. Is what is delicious there to you? So, and try to go with the magical theme here. So, like for mine, there are giggles that grow on trees. And if you don't know what giggles are, they're like the healthier form of Skittles, so you can feel good while eating them. But they grow magically on the trees. And also, there's a breakfast buffet there that continually makes delicious breakfast foods that are ready for me. And I never have to clean up or cook any of it, which is nice. But you can make whatever you like. Maybe there's a chocolate river. I don't know, whatever you think might be delicious to you in this space. And what would it smell like there? So you could see I'm trying to involve all of your senses as much as I can, or a lot of your senses, I should say. And so for me, I love the smell of lavender. So there's a lavender lake, and I love the smell of flowers. So there's lots of fresh flowers there. But for you, maybe it's oranges or peppermint or cinnamon, whatever it is that you love to smell that brings you comfort and joy. I want you to try to incorporate that into this space too. And this doesn't just have to be used for if you're having nightmares or if you haven't had an ideal grief dream and you want one. This can be used too just in your everyday life if you are feeling overwhelmed. If you think about this place, the hope is that it will help to calm down your entire nervous system as it's involving so many of your senses. And so feel free to work on this right now while we're talking. Some people do their best engagement when they're doing. And so if you'd like to do that, feel free, or you can leave this till after. It's totally up to you. Okay. And this is where things are supposed to come up on the screen. There we go. All right. So I want to start out talking about storybooks because that's usually the go-to that people have when it comes to children's grief is they want to have storybooks to give children. And sometimes I feel like this might be more for the adult than it might be for the child because they're looking for ways to introduce these topics and try to bring up the conversation. I find in the play therapy and art therapy sessions that I do, children rarely, if ever, go towards the books. But sometimes this can be helpful for adults as a way to engage and bring out the conversation about it. But I want to put a couple caveats on books. So feel free to change them if they don't feel, if there's things in it that just don't feel right to you or aren't current, because a lot of these books are written a long time ago. So, for instance, there's one called Lifetimes. Beautiful book, lovely book. I like it too because it goes less into metaphors and it talks more concretely, which children often are more adept in rather than the metaphors. But at one point in the book, they say that people live until on average 60 to 70 years old. That's not the case. That was written a really long time ago. And so I will often say something when I'm reading that page, this was written a long time ago. And so more often than not, the average age is more like 80 now. And that's just an average. There's some people that live up to like 105. So I'm doing that too because I don't want the children to feel this increased anxiety because they know people in their life that are 60 and 70. So that's important to name these things. Also, if you're reading a book, like I would say one of the go-to books that people will talk about is The Invisible String. It's a lovely book. It's very helpful when it comes to separation anxiety, which happens a lot for children, especially after grief. And there's a part that says, um, will the string reach to my uncle Brian, who's in heaven? What I do is I put a sticker over the words in heaven and I change it to my uncle Brian, who has died. So that way it's a book for all because we really want to make sure that these books are representative of all children that you might be helping to support and not just some with a particular viewpoint. And same thing when dinosaurs die, there is a part that does, it talks about more religions in there, which is helpful, but not all. Again, so often I will glue together those pages and we just skip those pages because if it's not going to include everybody, then I usually don't use those books or use those parts of those books. So feel free to change books is the message here. And I have a book that I'll show you later that I've wanted to change so many times that I actually pulled it from publication. And so you can't actually buy them anymore, but they are free on my website now because I wanted to change them so often from new knowledge that I was learning. And so that's the way that I got around it. Okay. So I took out a lot of the theory. I was telling Joshua and Stephanie beforehand that my presentation was a little longer today, so I cut out some stuff, but this part I just couldn't cut out because I think it's so important to talk about silver linings. And silver linings are typically given out of love. Usually they're coming from a place of care and wanting to, in a way, rescue people out of grief. And what I hear from almost every age of people grieving is I don't want to be rescued out of my grief because grief is my expression of love and I want to sit in it and I want you to sit in it with me. And that's usually where we can be the most helpful is when we can sit with people in their grief. And so I have this list. I'm not going to go through it all, but the ones on the left are ones that sometimes people say out of love and care that grievers have mentioned aren't as helpful to them. I hope that it's on the left side. I don't know. I think if it probably is showing up that way with you guys. Okay. And then on the right side is alternative things that you could say. Just some ideas. Of course, you could say your own. And if you're ever struggling to wonder what to say, you could always just say, I don't know what to say right now. And I'm just so happy that you shared that with me. So that's always a go-to that you could say if you don't know what to say. But I do want to talk about a couple ones just to stress here to try to never say, and this isn't even just with grief, just in general in life, to try not to say the words at least to anybody who has just shared something with you um, that is powerful and impactful for them. So things like, at least you still have other children. That is said to grievers sometimes when they've had a child die. At least you know you can get pregnant after they've had a miscarriage. Or at least you're young and you'll find another love. Instead, you could say something like, it's devastating to have someone so important in your world not physically here anymore. And I say physically here because I don't know what their beliefs are. And so that's the way that I choose to usually word it. Another one that I wanted to point out, because this actually just came up recently, is this you're so strong, you'll get through this. I had a youth tell me that they went to their parents' service and they gave a speech and everybody afterwards were like, "Whoa, you're so strong. Like it's so incredible how strong you are." And they said that they hated every moment of people saying that because they felt like what they were saying was that they were proud of them for not crying, that they were proud of them for not showing their vulnerability, and then it felt less safe to do so after. And so instead we can say things like you don't have to be strong right now, or even you could say, sometimes strength comes from crying. Sometimes strength is vulnerability because it's hard to be vulnerable in front of other people. Um, okay, I could go on about this for a while, so I'm gonna skip to the next one, and also just give you something that you can go and look up as well. This is a Brene Brown video. It's only a couple minutes, and it talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy, but it also goes into silver linings as well. So I think it really um, sums up what I'm trying to tell you today as well. Okay. Another one that I just couldn't cut out is just this idea of all feelings are welcome. Um, Often when we think about grief, we think about sadness. And there might be some very complicated feelings that people feel after somebody has died. Some people might even feel relief or joy, even. And then they might feel tremendous guilt or shame for some of that feeling. Some people might feel anger, even intense anger towards the person who has died for a variety of reasons. And so I think it's so important that we name this, especially when we know that there's been the death was complicated, and their relationship was complicated. I think it's so important that we name that these feelings are normal and natural and that all feelings are welcome. So that way they feel safe talking to you and sharing those feelings with you and not just the sadness parts. But when it comes to children and youth, um, usually not, I mean, there's some children that will come in and be like, let me share all my feelings with you. But typically that's not the case. More often they're sharing it through behaviors. And that's why their loved ones have connected with us. And so what you might notice with children is a regression into a different place in their life where they might have felt more safe. So you might notice even like a younger voice that they're using. And so I try to name that and say, I notice that your voice sounds a little bit younger right now. Um, and or maybe uh, I wonder how you're feeling right now. Like your voice sounds different to me, something like that. So just a naming it, noticing it, but not a shaming it at all. And maybe they're having a hard time sleeping on their own, perhaps. Maybe they're having a hard time eating. These might be things that we're noticing rather than talking about their grief. And perhaps it might be coming out as anger as well. So perhaps we're seeing it as they're throwing down chairs in the room. Perhaps it's outward expressions of anger. And so we actually, in the children's group, we have a whole day dedicated to anger, which we actually did yesterday in the group. And so what we did is this wonderful activity right here, which is smashed feelings. It's a very messy one. Just warning you all, if you decide to do this, this is bingo dabbers, so they don't wash out very easily. But what you do with the bingo dabbers is you turn them upside down, give them a little squeeze, and put a popsicle stick in them to make all the ink come down, and then you smash it. And I ask the kids to think about before they start doing this, think about things that might have been frustrating to them lately or times where they've been feeling anger and trying to get that out through this expression. Because sometimes when people feel anger, they get this electricity in their body that feels like electricity. And sometimes with children who have a harder time getting back into their front brain, perhaps at that time, they might lash out through hitting. And so it's helpful for us to give them all sorts of different activities that they can use to have that feeling. So that might be, we actually made drums yesterday too, out of duct tape and some gardening bins that, like, some planter kind of box things. So another way for us to do that kind of like smashing feeling. And then also like throwing pine cones or throwing things that are safe, just a way to get some of that movement without it being more towards violence where it could go. Another thing that we do in the group and that I do in sessions as well is we create these feeling tornadoes. And so basically, it's a shiny glitter bottle that I use to distract them while I talk about feelings and explain what happens to their brains. And so what we do is we shake it up after they've created it. And then I talk about how when they're feeling their emotions swirling around like this, it's an awful hard time to talk about their feelings at that time and express their emotions because when their emotions are swirling around like this, we're usually in our back brain, in our survival brain. And so we've usually shut down this front part of our brain because we need the power to go to the back. And so the front part actually has our ability to see the consequences of our behaviors, our ability to organize thoughts. And so if that's shut down, it's an extremely hard time to talk about how we feel. And so this is so important for adults to know too, because often when we see children in distress, we want to get them out of distress really quickly. But they're probably not, the front part's not as online at that time. So for them to be able to really capture what you're saying, it's really difficult. And so it's much more helpful for us to validate the feelings at that time, and later, once it's all settled down, once this glitter has settled just like their feelings, that's when we can talk about the feelings and also maybe set some boundaries if there has been some destruction of the space perhaps. All right. I also have a list that children have created. That's what that volcano is there to remind me of. Um, that children have created throughout their time with me of all different ways that they can express their feelings when they're feeling overwhelmed, healthy ways that they can express their feelings. And so sometimes I get them to look at this list beforehand and highlight which ones that they would try or create their own list and then have that somewhere available to them. So when they're feeling overwhelmed, they can go to the list because it's really hard to think about what will help them when they're in their back brain. Okay. So ways for caregivers to help support. I think that often caregivers, out of so much love, come to me because they want to help support their children. But I always have a question on my intake of what supports do you have right now? And often they're like, not a lot, because they're so much more focused on their children, which makes sense. It's a way that um, often parents are trying to show their love, right? Is to make sure that they're getting supports for their children. But I think it's so, so important for them to be getting their support because they're the most important person in that child's life. And so we at the hospice have this incredible group called the Children and Family Grief Group. And we have an amazing person that runs the adult part of the group as well, and some incredible volunteers as well. So what we do is the first week and the last week, everybody's all together. But the 6 weeks in the middle, the adults have their own group and the children have their own group. So the adults are getting that support at the same time. So they don't have to take extra time out of their schedule or anything like that. And they're already there. And we ask them to be there too to help support their children in case they need it. So we don't want them to leave the building even during that time. And so it's a way for us to do that at the same time and get the whole family to get help. Um, I always say it's not enough to pretend that we're okay as adults. And actually, because of children's very egocentric worldviews, um, they will often, if they feel like something's off with an adult in their life, they will think it's about them. And so it's so important for adults, for all of us, to tell the children and really to tell everybody in our life when we're having an off day, when something's been upsetting to us. So if we're looking off into the distance because we're thinking about something that's affected us, that the people in our lives don't believe it's about them. So it's so important for us to name, I had a really bad day, or I've been thinking about Uncle Tom a lot today, and I feel like crying. Just to name it so that way they can tell that it's not about them. And it helps to just a model reaching out for support as well. All right. So here's more of the like what we can do as helpers. So being alongside, parallel play. I don't know if you've had this situation, if you've been in a car with somebody or fishing or something that you're doing that's like a side by side activity. And those sometimes are where you have the most beautiful conversations. And it's because the person doesn't have to look at you because it's really intimidating talking about our feelings in the first place, let alone having to stare at somebody and wonder about the judgment that might come up on their face. And so it can be so much more easy to share these things if we're doing it in parallel from somebody. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about sand play after that, because that's one of my favorite ways to do this. But there's also art, and gardening can be so healing and helpful. Uh, but then also, I really want to talk to you about board games, and in particular about Uno No Mercy. Has anybody played Uno No Mercy? Yeah, I wouldn't suggest it. It is ruthless. So, like, the normal Uno where you're getting like +2, +4 kind of thing, right? This is like +10. Like, this is, I'm going to steal all your cards. This is like, it's just the most ruthless game of Uno. And I was playing this with a child the other day, and there's actually a rule where if you get up to 25 cards, then you're out right away. And that can happen within like one round. So this child was like, we're not playing it that way. We're going to play it where you can have as many cards as you want. I'm like, all right. And then this child changed every rule on me. Like, we were reading the rules, and they were changing everything to make it so I would lose no matter what every time. And I had so many cards that I had to like put them in different places and like line them up because so I could just organize it. It was so overwhelming for me. And we played Uno No Mercy for almost an hour. It was the longest game of Uno I've ever had, the most frustrating longest game of Uno I've ever experienced. And when I thought about that session, because sometimes I think about like, what am I doing when I'm playing and doing board games, and like, how is this therapeutic? But when I thought about it, I was like, that was a reflection of this child's life. And they were getting me to feel it of no matter what I did, I wasn't good enough. No matter what I did, I couldn't win. I was always up against it. And they were getting me to feel that way. So children will often set us up to feel the way that they feel. People do this too, like just in general, that they set us up to feel the way that they're feeling to see how you'll react. And it's a subconscious thing. It's not something that they're doing knowingly, but it can give us kind of a reflection of what they're going through. So what I did the whole time was I was reflecting that, like, I feel like no matter what I do, I can't win. Like, I feel so frustrated that I can't get past, I can't get rid of all these cards. They're just all in my way. And so I'm reflecting it back so that way they can get a sense that somebody gets them. So, other ways for helping adults to help support is always encouraging questions, asking on the regular, do you have any questions for me? Anything that you want to ask? I'm always here if you want to ask questions. It's so important. Grounding yourself so you can be attentive is really important because our grief inevitably will be touched by the grief of others. And so having a space to have your own support is so important. Um, we have this pretty amazing support that we have at the hospice right now, called Slice and Support. And what we do is we have pizza together, we have some slices, and we talk about how things have been going for us. And it's just so incredibly important to be able to name these things so we're not bringing them into other spaces in our life. And so when we go into these spaces where we're helping others, that we can leave that because we know we have a space, a safe space to go and express it later. Play. Play is the language of children. It's their first language. It's the language that is universal to all children as well. And so it makes sense that this is how they would express themselves. And I believe that play is never just play. There's usually a reflection of what they're going through within the play. And that's where we can find out what's happening. And often I love sand tray work, and with the little figurines and everything. I have so many little figurines to be able to express stories because when they're in those little forms and it's indirect, it can be kind of away from us a little bit. It's so much safer to express the thoughts and feelings that we might be having inside. And again, they might not even be knowingly doing this as well. So just so you know, the work that you're seeing right here is mine. It's not children's. I typically don't share children's work. And so this is just a reflection of something so that way you can see kind of what I typically might see in a sand tray session. And so you can kind of tell from these two different parts of this image that there's a different scene on either side. And so sometimes it's easy to guess what's happening in the play, but we try not to assume. So when you look on the one side, you might see, well, it looks super scary. And you might reflect that, like, ooh, seems super spooky over there. Like I'm seeing a Grim Reaper and a fire breathing dragon and all sorts of things that might look a little scary. And then on the other side, it seems more relaxed. It seems more peaceful. Um, but we don't know, too, right? These are all just assumptions. And so I can reflect it. And usually a child will tell me if I'm wrong, and they will say, no, that's not at all what I meant. I love the spooky stuff. And that's where it's way more peaceful for me. So I try never to assume, but I just try to give some gentle reflections. And even, I don't know if you can see, but there's a little crow in that peaceful space. And I put that in there just to remind myself to let you know about not assuming things, because for most people, when they see a crow, they might think that's an ominous figure. For me, it's my second favorite animal of all time. And so it's in my peaceful place, but it might not be in yours. So just another thing to think about, to try not to assume what all these symbols might mean. So sometimes we might know what's happening, but really the most important thing is to trust the process, to trust that the children know what's happening and that they will play out what they need to. And because I didn't know if Buddy or Pal would be awake during this session, I got them in a picture so you could see them as well. But in the one where Pal's in, he's the black cat over there with the white on his nose. Um, there's a little image of a penguin and some trumpets in there. And maybe you were like, I have no idea why they created that. But then maybe a couple months later, you find out that their aunt who had died, that their favorite animal was penguins and that they were a musician. But sometimes you might not ever find out what it's all about. And you might just be left wondering, which is fine. So you might be wondering, where's that monkey going? And like, oh, that eel might look a little scary down there. And I wonder what that's all about. Or why are there pigs? Why are there two little pigs in there? Who knows? And so you might not ever be able to find out. But sometimes just giving those gentle reflections can give you a little bit of an idea, because they'll likely correct you or tell you what the story is about. Um, Working in brain breaks. And so I say this, it's not mindfulness. That's not what I'm totally going for. It's more of a actual break for your brain. Because sometimes even being mindful and being in the moment can be incredibly hard, because the moment that we're in right now is incredibly hard. And so it's more about just letting your brain have a break from all of the thinking. And so maybe that's going to go play on the playground for a little bit. Maybe that is video games, which some people might disagree with me on this. But I think it can be an incredible break for your brain as long as you don't do too much. But that it can be helpful because it involves all, like it involves your hands and your eyes and your ears, and it really can get you immersed into something else. So you just can give your brain a break from the things that might be bothering you or worrying you. I like to encourage remembering activities. That's what the grief group is mainly made up of, is a whole bunch of different remembering activities. And I'll show you some links of where you can see how to do a lot of these activities as well, like the memory lanterns or the layers of love. I really want to focus a lot of the work on continuing bonds. And so that's, how do we involve our loved ones that we're thinking about into our present day life? How do we bring them into those special days where we might be missing them? We do something in the group where we have these amazing quilts that get donated for each group, and so each child gets to have a quilt, and then they bring in often a piece of fabric that reminds them of their loved one, and then I sew it to the bottom of their quilt in a U shape, so they can still put their feet in and cozy themselves up in it. But then also it can be turned around and made into a pillow as well. And so just a way for them to connect with their loved one. Facilitating feelings is super important. And so one of the activities is having candy and talking about feelings. So I have this little legend that says things like, I feel sad when, or something I can do to help myself when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And you pick out the giggle is what I use is giggles for this one. And then you would answer the question. And then if you answer the question, you eat the candy. And the kids really like that game. But if there are some kids that you have that don't want the candy, you could do it with pom poms as well. That's another option. And then one of my other favorite ones is the beach ball of emotions. This one has gotten some children who are just so not wanting to talk about feelings, this has gotten them talking. And so what you do is you throw the ball back and forth, whatever lands on your thumb, you talk about a time you felt that way or a time you would feel that way. So it doesn't have to get too personal. Um, but it's a way I find just because they're moving as well that it can be really helpful for them to start expressing their feelings or get more comfortable with it. And something I just want to mention quick, I know we're running out of time, but the facilitating of feelings for the talking treats that I do, I used to have it so it said, like, blank makes me feel sad. And then somebody lovely, a wonderful volunteer pointed out to me, I think that you should switch that language to I feel sad when, because it gives us ownership over our feelings. Instead of saying that something makes me feel this way, it's I feel sad when. And so I often now try to do this too when I hear children say, oh, that made me feel so angry. I'd be like, oh, you felt angry about this. And so I switch it so that way they can hopefully feel more ownership because with children, they have so little in their lives that they have control over. If you think about their lives, really, about school, about who's in their class, who their friends are, even what they eat for dinner, there's so much that might not be in their control. And so to give them power and control over their feelings can be incredibly empowering. And just remember that people express their feelings in many ways. And so for some, that might be talking. For others, it might be listening. I've had children come to the group and they never say a word. They don't even introduce themselves. And then their caregiver will be like, they said it was so helpful. And I'm like, great, good to know. Because sometimes listening can be super impactful as well. But maybe it's running a race in memory of their loved one. Maybe it's doing some arts and crafts like you see here. So everybody might express themselves differently, and it's just important for us to allow that. So this book that I wanted to point out to you that I had written, it's about a grief group. And I put that there because I think that grief groups can be so helpful. So I'm just going to show you here. So it's a way to introduce grief groups and what they might be like. So that way, hopefully, they'll feel more comfortable going there. And so And if you look at your local hospices, there's often grief groups that are happening. So this first part is helpful hints for caregivers or adults that are reading the books to the children. And then it goes into the story here. And so you can see they start the grief group pretty quick. And then they go into different sharing of memories. And then they go off into a little field trip and they make their cozy remembering quilts. And then a little bit more sharing of feelings. And then it talks about secondary losses in here a little bit, which I think is so important to talk about. And then at the bottom, this is where you're going to find activities that go along with each one of the books. So there's a few different books. There's this one about feelings and how they affect our body, and another one about the difference between anger and abuse, which is, I think, another really important topic. And then there's activities at the end. So let's say you want to learn about the layers of love, then you can go there and it will take you to that activity with all the explanation of what you need and how to do it as well. I'm going to go back here now. Okay, so I'm not quite done. I do want to share just a little bit of resources with you, but the very first thing before we end here is I want to talk about wishes because I do this in the group and also with individual support as well. Is we always make a wish to end off our time together. And so I want you all to think about a wish that you might have, a hope that you might have. And I want you to think about something that can hopefully come true. One of the main wishes that children will express is that they want their loved one to come back to life. And so that's why I add that part in about a wish that can hopefully come true, because that one can't, as far as technology has brought us right now, but never know for the future, hopefully. But then I also talk about how it's helpful to share our wishes out loud with people that we think can help our make our wish come true. Because often we have this superstition that if we keep our wishes inside, that they're more likely to come true. But I just don't agree with that. I actually, just to share a little personal story, when I was younger, I would wish every time, every year, for myself to get an easy bake oven. And I remember telling my mom that in like my early 20s, and she was like, "Why didn't you just ask for one?" I'm like, that's okay, a revelation. And so I always talk about like if you could share your wishes out loud to the people that you think can help you make those wishes come true, then I would suggest doing that. And so I want you all to think about your wish, a wish that you think can hopefully come true. I also want you to hopefully share that out loud to the person that you think might be able to help you with it. Now we're going to blow this candle out all together. So if you can help me in three, two, one. Ah, magic. PowerPoint magic. Okay, so one more thing I just want to show you is resources that you can use. So Kids Help Phone, incredibly helpful. They actually have like you can text them, you can use their online support as well. So super helpful for youth who might be a little nervous to come in for support. There's also Foundry for youth as well, is another great one. Kidsgrief.ca, the BC Bereavement Helpline has incredible training and groups as well. Sesame Street Workshop has some ones for children's grief specifically, and also this one supporting children with grief. So a lot of the stuff that I cut out today is actually here if you care to read more about it. So this is a whole bunch of different articles that I put together of things that I like to talk about when it comes to children's grief. The 10 common questions from children with grief and how you can help answer those, differences in how adults and children grieve. This one is an ode to Joshua's work supporting children with grief dreams. Behaviors are an expression of feelings, which we talked about a little bit. Supporting children with sudden and traumatic loss, showing your grief, using the D words, dead, died, and dying. Especially, I didn't say that when it comes to books. If you can find books that use the words dead, died, and dying, super important, and bringing them up. And I know we're going short on time, but now I've just thought of something that I really want to say. In terms of why it's important to say dead, died, and dying, and not say the words lost, not say that we have, that they went to sleep and didn't wake up, not to say that they got really, really sick and died. All of those are because those can bring out anxiety about common things that we experience, like people get lost sometimes. We go to sleep often, every day, hopefully. And also, people get sick all the time. I mean, heck, it's cold and flu season right now, right? So, um, just to not bring up more anxiety about that, it's really important that we name it a little bit more. So we say they got really, really sick with heart disease, with cancer, with whatever it is. So that way we're explaining more that it's not just that they got sick and died. And I think that's it. Yes, that's it. And so we still have 10 minutes, maybe five for question and answers. And then I think Joshua has some stuff to wrap up too. Would you like me to stop my share there?
Sure, yeah, that would be good.
Okay, awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Alice. I know I learned a lot. You have a lot of wisdom, and I love the play and I love the pictures. That was great. I really enjoyed that. And so For anyone, we have some time for questions. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, and we can hear that, or you can put it in the chat. So as people are thinking about questions, or maybe they're still thinking about their wishes and who to tell. I know November 21st is Children's Grief Awareness Day. And so I'm just curious, Alice, have you seen a shift in children's grief awareness just over the years since you've really been a part of this field?
Yeah, especially with more and more organizations like the Canadian Alliance for Grieving Children or the Children's Grief Foundation of Canada, there is more people that are trying to come out and give those stats of what children are experiencing. So definitely, I've seen a shift. Yeah, I do see a question here, but it was I just don't know exactly about what they were saying. It was that they were trying to start a program like this where they were, but they couldn't get interest. And so just suggesting how to encourage the participation. And I'm just curious if that person could, is it about the grief group that they were talking about? I'm guessing. Yeah, okay. So how I've gotten uh, actually so many children and youth are now signed up and we always have full times is because I've gotten really involved in the schools. And so we have these things called CAS meetings where we are, and so it's community agencies, support teams, and we come together, and all the principals and vice principals are a part of it from each one of the schools. So they get to know us and get to know the programs really, really well. And because we do it every quarter, then they're continually hearing about our program so they don't forget. So I think that's been a huge part of getting all of those referrals. Yeah. We have a link for the resources. I'm happy to send out also on my on that's something here. I'm going to share my screen again if that's cool. Well, I did it anyway, so I guess it's going to be cool. So we're going to go up here. There's on my website, there's one that says resources. And when you click on that, it's got all of the resources that I named and also a whole bunch more. So stuff from Canadian Virtual Hospice, the Dougie Center. There's ones for youth in specific, Children and Youth Grief Network, the Canadian Alliance for Grieving Children, Grief Dreams, of course, and a whole bunch of other ones that hopefully could be helpful to you as well. And so that would be a good list for the resources. And I'm always updating those. So if you have anything that you think I should add to it, then please let me know.
There's a question about if you run any formal training sessions on your methods.
Um, I have in the past. I did a 2-day one right before my first mat leave with the BC Bereavement Helpline, which was so awesome to get to do like 2 full days because obviously I'm very excited about all this stuff and also I love to do experiential trainings too, where you actually getting to try the activities as well for yourself to know what it's like to do the activities that the children's do. So it's kind of one off though. I did one recently with the YMCA, but I'm always interested if anybody wants to connect with me about that. I really love talking about this. So, and the books, um, so if you're asking about my books, those ones are I pulled them from Amazon. I pulled them from all the distribution places because I wasn't as proud of them as I once was when I wrote them back in 2016. And so that's why they're now available just for free on my website instead. I know it's not as ideal, but you could print it, I guess, out as well. And I can always send people like a copy, a PDF copy that you can print out too. I'm happy to do that.
We have a question, I guess, Rachel, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was curious about how you navigate children as they age, readdressing their grief in different developmental stages. It's something in my work that I'm often talking to parents about being aware of, but do you let children generally self-identify that they need to like readdress this in a different sort of developmental way, or are there things that you specifically look for or tell parents, caregivers to look for in terms of behaviors that need to be addressed again? I'm just curious how you kind of approach that.
I love that question, and thanks for bringing it up because I'm always cautioning about age, and I loved how you said it instead, that it's about development because it's not always about the age in which they'll experience grief in different ways, and sometimes grief comes to us randomly throughout life. Grief is a lifelong thing, and so it's not about that age, but it can be about development because some things can come more to the surface as you're experiencing different things. Perhaps like at a graduation, all of a sudden things are coming up over you because you had thought that your loved one would be there for that time. And so definitely I am always talking about like what behaviors to look out for, things like struggling, things that are really a difference from what they're normally doing. So if you're noticing that they're eating a lot less or sleeping a lot less or things like that, and it doesn't go away after a couple of weeks, then I would be concerned about that. I do for the children's group, it does look a lot different than the youth group. We actually tried to start a youth group, and it was based off of the children's group in terms of the art and the remembering activities, and we had one youth sign up. They were not feeling it at all. And so I asked the youth who were coming in to see me individually, like, what do you want? And they were like, friendship and food. And I don't want to talk about my grief in front of other people. And so that's what we did. We created this once a month group. It goes for 8 months of the year. And we now have 24 youth registered and who come regularly. It's incredible. And it's just a place for them to have fun and connect and make friendships and meet peers who are going through similar things because that's often a disconnect that they feel from their peers that they have when they've gone through such a significant loss at a younger age.
Wow.
I
All
hope.
right. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for that. It was a great question too. And so we are almost at the time. So we just want to do another poll, same poll as the first poll that we did, just to see where your knowledge is now. So has it increased because of today's session? All right, numbers are coming in. A lot of people are saying a lot and some, so that is amazing, Dallas. So thank you for being a part of today and allowing, just giving us your time to sort of and share your wisdom because we're all learning. And so it's always nice when we have people who are experts in the field providing us this information. And
Thank
so
you.
as we wrap up, we hope you enjoyed it. And at the end of when you close the Zoom, a short survey will pop up. And so if you could fill that out, that'd be great. If not, that's okay. I know everyone's time is valuable. So registration for the next session in the series for next month is neurodiverse grief and bereavement. And so that's on December 3rd. And so that's at from 12 to 1. And so to be notified of any other sessions in the series, you can always sign up for the BCCPC newsletter. And then lastly, our aim is to provide you a copy of the recording, any kind of summary notes and resources in the next 7 working days. So please watch your email for that. And you can always visit the center's website to know more about any other ECHO programs that we're having. So once again, thank you, Dallas, for being here. And also thank you, all the people here today for taking time out of your day to learn more. I think that just helps us as we move forward in the future to provide just better support for grieving children and their caregivers.